Another year, another one of these top 10s on my favourite games, shows and movies that I watched and played across it. I'm not going to waste any time explaining how this works since I've already done separate videos for the previous 2 years. No new guidelines to bring up that I haven't already mentioned there. So I guess I can take this time to list out some honourable mentions. Movies took up the bulk of what I saw this year, so I'm only going to mention the highlights. I marathoned all the Godzilla movies, and unsurprisingly the 1954 classic was ahead of the pack for a while, but at the last minute it was overtaken by GMK, which came the closest to cracking the list. I could see the influence they both had on -1, My Beloved, which is really cool. -1 would have swept this entire list by the way, but it was already on last year's list. And now that I've rewatched it twice since that video came out, I'd probably put it at the top of that list in retrospect as well. Inception was a mindfuck and maybe a little too long for me, but I thoroughly enjoyed everything to do with the big heist. The Inanimate Insanity movie was a satisfying finale to a show that I've kept up with since I was, I want to say 11 or 12. I know some of my audience loves it when I throw in references to it every now and again, so there you go. The Kaguya Love is War movie, where the title is a spoiler, was a fantastic follow-on from season 3. Took a minute to really get going, but once it did, I immensely connected with the conflict of not wanting others to see you at your worst versus forcing your worst on others to see if that makes them leave you, and the whole bit about how small moments and gestures shared with the ones you love are no less inherently valuable than stuff that's big and extravagant. Also, the handcuffs bit was hysterical. Look Back's a movie that I loved when I saw it in theaters, and I've only grown to appreciate it more upon further reflection. It is staggering what it's able to do with a runtime clocking in at less than an hour. It should be required viewing for any creatives out there. Fury Road was my favourite of the Mad Max series, shockingly hot take, I know. Monkey Man was great, I don't really have a ton to say about it other than it's brutal, visceral, and a must-watch for any John Wick fan. I did a whole video on my first impressions of the Elm Street movies, and to the surprise of very few, my favourite ended up being Dream Warriors by a landslide. It's everything I love in that series operating at its fullest. Paddington in Peru is simultaneously my least favourite of the trilogy, and the closest that anything I saw this year got to making me cry, so take that for what it's worth. Sonic 3 was arguably the most hyped theatrical experience of the year for me. Seeing it with my international friends was a delight, and I would have totally made a video on it if my schedule wasn't too full around the time. And although I'd intended to only mention the movies I gave a 9 out of 10 here, I do want to briefly shout out Spy Family Code White, even if it just barely missed that threshold, for being one of the most special experiences I had at my local theatre. After a morning that left me really irritated, it was a great escape to get to see one of my favourite series on the big screen. I did a full video on the movie, so go check that out if you want my more detailed thoughts. As for games, I didn't get through a ton this year. There was the Steam game Madeline, whose creator I follow since I really like their art style, and the game is pretty great too. It's a short but sweet arcade-esque game with a ton of unlockables to give it more replay value. If you like Pac-Man, odds are you'll like this too. I finally played the first Banjo-Kazooie and had a great time with it, except for Clanker's Cavern, which might be one of the most miserable gaming experiences of my life, but most of the other levels were delightful. I breezed through TMNT Shredder's Revenge with some friends. I don't think I would have been as into it on my own, but it was a perfect group game to just vibe with, and I'd happily go through it again. Or just play more of the arcade mode, which had plenty of cool exclusive abilities and gimmicks. I played Mario 64 DS as a kid, but only just now got around to the original classic on the Switch Online expansion pass, and it was fun enough to keep me enjoying it all the way through in spite of how badly it tested my patience sometimes. But hey, 100% completion isn't mandatory. I could just skip anything that I didn't want to do. You're not getting me back in Rainbow Ride, I refuse. Is that everything? I could swear there's a series I've made my entire personality that I've just neglected to mention. Oh right, Mario Kart! Yeah, I played 64 and didn't really like it. I'm just bringing it up so that I can say I covered everything. Battle mode is fun at least, but the slippery controls led to me getting nothing out of the normal racing mode in spite of how solid many of the tracks were. And I think that's it for games that didn't make the list. Shows aren't doing much better because I have a similar amount of honourable mentions to games, but in this case there actually weren't any that made it onto the list. The closest that anything got was Delicious in Dungeon Season 1, an absolute delight that I watched over some VCs with a small group, and we were enjoying this silly goofy monster food show. Then the last 2 episodes hit us with unexpectedly devastating emotional moments out of nowhere. What the fuck? I need Season 2 in my life immediately. Waiter, more senshi please. I also watched the second seasons of Invincible and Smiling Friends after I really liked their first ones, and I'd consider both a step up in a few ways. Invincible doesn't hit the same peaks as the Omni-Man stuff in its debut season, but it also managed to make me actually get a little bit invested in Mark's relationship drama this time. So lower heights in exchange for less low lows. Smiling Friends was the other way around. Season 1 was really consistent all the way through, whereas this new season was a mix of stuff that wasn't really doing it for me, and also the funniest shit in the show by a landslide. There was barely any in between. Inanimate Insanity Season 3 also wrapped up in early 2024, so there you go, that's 2 whole references for you guys to freak out about in the comments. You're feasting well today. Not that any of these last few would count for the list regardless because of the rules I set for myself last year about shows that I'd already started. You know what I didn't already start though? Nichijou, and I'm glad I finally got around to it after so long because it was very funny. The jokes didn't always hit, but the ones that did took me out. Great stuff. And I guess for the sake of covering everything, I did also watch Hazbin Hotel Season 1 because it was only 8 episodes and I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Clearly I've got my priorities straight. Many people love this show, many hate it, and I am pretty much right between them. I really like some of the songs and characters, the jokes were a mixed bag, it's not paced well at all and barely focuses on the premise. But generally I don't have too many strong feelings on it. I had a decent enough time with it, but I also wouldn't question if someone said they hated it. Wow, that was a lot more than I expected. Time for the actual top 10.
The pink copies go to accounting, the future ones go to purchasing, and the goldenrod ones go to Roz.
Very last minute addition to the list after I hadn't really thought about updating it during the final few months of 2024, but then I put some thought into it and yeah, sure, Wild Robot can go in here. I was super excited to see it for months. And unlike Last Wish, I didn't have to hear about it every single day until the super late UK release, so I got to remain excited going in without getting tired of it. What praise is there left to heap on this movie that hasn't already been said during its theatrical run? That it's absolutely gorgeously animated, that pretty much every single character from our main trio to even the less prominent comic relief animals managed to endear me except for the ones that are specifically not supposed to, that it's a really touching story about parenthood with one of the strongest emotional cores DreamWorks has ever cooked up, that the initial wordless trailer was entirely indicative of the quality of the movie and absolutely nothing gets dampened by the animals talking. It's all been said before and it's all true. Maybe it could have been a little longer to let some parts feel less rushed, but that's about my only major point of criticism with any of this. Just about everything here is fantastic. And although I don't prefer it to Last Wish, this is the most I've enjoyed my first viewing of a new DreamWorks movie since Kung Fu Panda 2 dropped about 14 years ago. I love kind robot protagonist Charlie.
I've only just begun to pull the thread on this sweater, friends!
Remember in the first one of these annual lists that I did where I brought up the games that I started but never finished in 2022? So I did finish Pac-Man and Octodad in 2023, and for as much as I loved them, they didn't quite manage to make it onto that year's list. For some reason, my favourite of the three, Unravel, was the one I was taking at the slowest pace of boot it up before bed, finish one level, go to sleep, repeat again in a few months. Don't know why, because it's not a particularly long game, and even back in 2022, it was my favourite of the ones that I had in progress. Well, in 2024, I finally sat down and made myself finish it, then went through its sequel immediately after and adored both of them about equally. So you know what, I'm just going to cover both of their spots at the same time. With my favourite game of all time being Portal 2, it's unsurprising that I'd enjoy another puzzle platformer based around physics and environmental awareness. And the Unravel games deliver on that while being wrapped in this cozy ball of charm. It's so fun to make my way through each of these gorgeous levels and figure out what I gotta do with the limited distance I can move and be able to go forwards. Every once in a while you'd maybe get something that feels like the way to figure out the path is a bit too hidden, but those are very rare exceptions. Most solutions came pretty naturally after getting my bearings and having time to think things over. The sequel changes up and expands on the mechanics by replacing your checkpoint headers with a second player that you're tied to the hip of. I was worried that it'd make it a multiplayer exclusive thing, but you can thankfully combine your two guys and control them as one no problem, which is good for me. As much as I would have been happy to play co-op with one of my siblings, I did not want a repeat of how long it took me to get through the first game as I waited for a point where we were both available and could be bothered. I honestly couldn't make a call between which of the two games I prefer. I love them about equally. 2 really does feel like an evolution gameplay-wise, but I did find myself getting a bit more emotionally wrapped up in the simple charms of the first game. 2's story is much more front and center, relatively speaking anyway, because it's still happening away in the background most of the time. And while it is good, the first game's credit sequence with the storybook hit me surprisingly hard emotionally. It was just a super endearing trip through memory lane as it gave a special thanks to everyone who worked on it. Oh, but 2 does also have the character customizations, and the advanced challenges if you're craving a bit more difficulty. I got just over half of them and went out of order. The difficulty felt a bit off sometimes. Some of the 3 stars were a piece of cake, but then I'd get stumped on a 2-star level and just stop after a point because I wasn't having any fun with them since most of my time would be spent on the setup parts to get another shot at the bit that was giving me bother. Either way, they're fun and I appreciate appreciate that they're there. Maybe I'll get through some more of them after another playthrough. So I guess you could say these lived up to the hype that I set for myself these last 2 years. The Unravel games are fantastic, if not ones I have a ton to say about. I love the core mechanics, Yarny's an adorable little creature that I wish nothing but the best for, the stories it tells as it takes you through the past experiences of this family and these friends are so endearing and emotionally investing. I don't know how I can best sell you on it, just go give them a try. I got the 2-pack bundle and it would have been well worth it even if they weren't on sale at the time. I've always had these games on my radar since I saw the super nervous presentation the creator gave at E3 2015, showing his passion as he put himself out there, and I'm so glad that I finally got around to them.
Good luck sleeping tonight.
If you see my animation studio debut film ranking from back in September, then you've already heard me talk about my first experience with watching Coraline. I've known about it since I was a kid, but I never checked it out until this year, and I'm very glad I waited because the amazing designs and creepy atmosphere that I can appreciate nowadays would have left 2009 me shaking and shitting. In the interest of trimming down this video wherever I can to not have it run for too terribly long, I'll just direct you to that previously mentioned video if you want to hear the full gist of my thoughts on the movie. But to give the Cliff Notes version to the people who aren't interested in being sent off on a side quest, I find the main character really sympathetic, the stop motion animation super impressive, the spooky aesthetic of Feast for the Eyes, the messages about what you want versus what you need compelling, and overall everything comes together to make one of my new favourite films. The visual presentation may be the shining star, but the story is almost equally as strong, making this a truly standout work of art to me. A shame I missed the 3D cinematic re-release. August was a busy month.
It's just like the film! Finding Dory!
I meant to marathon Christopher Nolan's filmography earlier this year, but then I kind of forgot to do that, so I only ended up watching a few of his works. Whoops, my bad. At least I got to see Memento, and yeah, that was peak. I don't really have a ton to say about it other than the story is really fascinating to watch unfold as we alternate between the very start and end, working both forwards and backwards until the point in time where both sides of the story collide and we get hit with a big plot twist that recontextualizes everything. It's truly riveting to watch Leonard Shelby try to get to the bottom of his wife's murder despite his short-term memory loss, giving such a strong hook in the plot that it makes me want to put in that work to keep track of everything that's going on with a potentially confusing time gimmick. And even then, it never got to the point where I was completely lost like I was during the entire climax of Tenet. Putting all the pieces together and seeing how things end up the way they did was incredibly satisfying, it never overstays its welcome, it keeps you guessing with who is and isn't telling the truth in every scene. It's just awesome. One of the first times in a while I got hit with the "there's no way it's that good, oh holy shit it's that good" phenomenon. Hard to believe this is only Nolan's second movie because I think it easily holds up as one of his best. It was also a great running gag for an episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so that's neat too.
Yes, I have some questions about all this myself, Stanley.
Remember when I said Love is War had my favourite use of a narrator in anything? Yeah, so I forgot about the Stanley Parable. I watched a playthrough of it well over a decade ago, but now we have the Ultra Deluxe edition that my friend gifted me on Steam for Christmas. So I finally played through it for myself, sought out about every ending, and yeah, it's fantastic. This is a game that makes the most of its medium. Not by having the most intricate controls out there, it really is as simple as moving around and watching the story unfold through your actions, but it fully leans into the interactivity and replayability that comes with these branching paths and the short length of each route. It wouldn't be the same if it was put out as a TV show or anything like that. It's a game all about the choices you make and fully encourages you to explore every possible option for how you can seek out new endings. Some places don't really lead anywhere, but when you do stumble across a new ending, it's always so fun to see where they go. That applied to me too, even as someone who'd already seen all the base game stuff ages ago and is rediscovering them with only faint memories of how they went. Some are only glorified Easter eggs, sure, but I didn't really want much more from those kinds. The big ones that are the main focus all generally landed for me. Some are ominous, some are beautiful, some are tragic, but they almost all have the common thread of the journey to get there being absolutely hilarious. I really connect with this game's sense of humour, mainly thanks to the narrator, whose witty writing is wonderfully vocalised by Kevin Brighting. His level of sophistication just makes it all the funnier when he does end up losing his composure, and the ways the character can change across the different paths makes him surprisingly compelling. Whether he's a hurting soul you feel sorry for, a malicious villain to be feared, or a clueless goofball along for the ride, it's all dependent on your decisions and he excels in every single role. I also really love the eerie liminal space aesthetic the game goes for. Really has me expecting a jump scare the whole time despite not being a horror game. And Ultra Deluxe brings plenty new to the table with not just the bucket endings, which can admittedly sometimes be hit or miss or barely change anything, but with plenty of new special locations and commentary on stakes staying true to your artistic vision and not compromising it for the sake of people who aren't willing to engage with the core of what you're trying to do. So all in all, this game is really special, one of my all-time favorites. Be sure to let me know what you think the best ending in the game is, because I genuinely struggle to make that choice. Have you even unlocked them all? Did you get the broom closet ending? That might be my favorite one, actually.
I am so lonely.
The Holdovers is the kind of movie that would make people say they don't make them like this anymore. Then you look and see it released less than 2 years ago. Somehow it manages to go in the exact direction you'd expect in terms of the characters learning to like each other because they're forced to spend time together, while also managing to subvert anytime it felt like they were going to play into a really tedious and cliche plot beat. Like anytime Paul or Angus had to keep a secret for each other, I kept bracing myself for when they spill the beans and have a falling out over it. Nope, they both maintain that trust to the very end and even put their own asses on the line to double down on it. When they were at the party, I was not looking forward to the inevitable big blowout where the pair gets into a fight and they cause a commotion so they have to leave and it's all embarrassing to sit through, and no. Instead, it's Mary who has a much more understandable and sympathetic reason for them to need to leave, and they don't ruin the party for it. And even though I knew where the characters' relationships would end up, I still found some aspects of that ending to be an unexpected emotional gut punch that I wouldn't dare spoil because I doubt it's the kind of movie that most of my usual audience would have already seen, and I really want to encourage you to check it out. It's an utterly phenomenal story about a found family triumphing over the bitter loneliness that can engulf people during the holiday season. One with an overwhelming feeling of earnestness and warmth, focused on an endearing cast who all have compelling individual emotional baggage, entertaining chemistry with each other, and stellar performances across the boards. If all that's not enough to sell you on it though, God, this movie's fucking funny. One of the best comedies I've seen in a while. The characters bickering is something I would normally find boring after a point, but here I was consistently laughing at their interactions through to the end. There's a chase scene that had me dying, and also the single hardest line I heard last year which doubles as the funniest. Again, not gonna spoil what it is. I mean, I technically already did in my Spy Family Code White review, but I don't think I need to worry about these movies having much overlap in who's watching them. If we don't count the 20th anniversary release of Shaun of the Dead, this is by far my favourite film I saw in theatres during 2024, and one of my favourite films of the decade so far. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It doesn't even need to be Christmas. It's an exceptionally comforting watch at any time of the year. Watch it under a blanket with a mug of hot chocolate on a humid night in July. Who's stopping you? Thanks for the recommendation, Liam.
I'm talking T2 Judgment Day business.
When I watched the first Terminator movie, I thought to myself, wow, that was really good. And the sequel's apparently even better? Yeah, I should get on that soon. That was right after the first lockdown started. For some reason, I only got around to Terminator 2 Judgment Day about 4.5 years later. Possibly one of the biggest blunders of my life because holy shit, this is just as good as everyone's been hyping it up to be. I knew generally what to expect in terms of the action and the villain. The fights are incredible, pulse-pounding, adrenaline-pumping awesomeness that repeatedly had me on the edge of my seat. And the T-1000 makes her one of the greatest villains I've ever seen in a film, proving to be far more advanced, versatile, and deadly than the T-800 ever was. If I didn't know the twist already, in fact it was more of a surprise to me to see it built up as a twist, I'm sure I would have been floored to see that Arnie's the good guy this time, and that our monster trying to kill John Connor can do all this horrifying shit. There were still plenty of aspects of this movie that I managed to somehow dodge spoilers on for all my life though, like Miles' entire character. I only knew a few of the plot beats beforehand, so I thought the whole movie would have been about tracking him down while the T-1000 follows closely behind. But I was shocked to find they were actually able to reason with him and he ends up sacrificing himself to take his research out and not doom the future, while also giving the message that toasts of destruction can come from people who are genuinely trying to do good for the world but their creations get misused. And of all the adjectives I'd expected to throw this film's way, charming was not one of them. Emotional wouldn't have been a shock, I knew about the ending at the steel mill, and I'd already seen some funny clips thrown around here and there, so I knew it wasn't all hardcore action and grit all the time. But I didn't realise that John's connection to his guardian robot Angel would be played like father-son bonding, filling the void that John had throughout all his life. It was surprisingly sweet and served to bolster the emotional core even further. Terminator 2 is immaculate in pretty much every way and is even better as a sequel. There's every argument to be made that it's the single best thing on this list. And in fact, I did have it as the top ranked movie for a bit, but then I rewatched the next entry with some friends and the bias of that experience shot it up just that slight bit higher. If I had a nickel for every time that I've done that.
That's actually hilarious.
I am here to continue to push the Hundreds of Beavers agenda. So like what I'm imagining is the case for a good few people, I'd heard about this movie through Shea Frillis Productions and one of his editors who I'm mutuals with. Shout out to Hal for being the biggest fan of Chuck E. Cheese in the Galaxy 5000 that I know. When I saw them log it in my Letterboxd feed, then saw it was from the same group as Lake Michigan Monster, which I'd already loved after the same niche internet micro-celebrities convinced me to watch that, I was beyond hyped to see what all the fuss was about. Could it really be as good as they were making it out to be? Well, I first watched it towards the end of October, and by the time I typed out this script in early January, I'd already seen it 2 more times, so what does that tell you? This movie is hysterical, and that's really all you need to know. Everyone comparing it to Looney Tunes in live action is 100% spot on. Usually that would be a negative descriptor you'd hear for, oh no, they remade this beloved animated thing shot for shot in live action with terrible effects and no personality. Except this time it's meant in the opposite way of it being so zany and wacky that it is essentially a cartoon despite not being animated. They throw out rapid fire gags constantly for the entire 100+ minute runtime, and pretty much every single one landed for me. Same goes for my friends who I got to watch it with me. I scheduled a watch party with some people the week after I first saw it because I needed to show some others. Then when I took a trip to America over the new year, I got to show even more people, and I don't think I've ever heard most of my friends laugh as hard as this. The rabbit footprint bit in particular had some of them near tears. I might honestly go as far as to call this the single funniest film I've ever seen, at least for my taste. Not my favourite comedy film overall, since I've mentioned my preference of jokes and hard-hitting emotional moments complementing each other, and some like Monsters, Inc. or the Cornetto trilogy do strike that balance a bit better for me. But Hundreds of Beavers knocks the comedy so far out of the park that it still gets to stand alongside them as one of my favourites. Plus, it isn't aiming to be all that emotionally moving, so can you really fault it in an area that it doesn't even attempt? That's not to say the comedy is the only thing it gets right. I do still like the story it tells about Jean Kayak becoming a master fur trapper, since it's structured like a Metroidvania game. Everyone I showed it to kept saying, oh, I thought you were being figurative. No, I mean it in the most literal sense. You are essentially watching a Let's Play and it's glorious. The visual style is also something to marvel at. A really unique blend of live action and 2D animated elements, green screens, puppets, really goofy suits that look amazing. It's clearly got a lower budget than your average Hollywood blockbuster, but you can see the creativity that these limitations were able to foster. I can't imagine anything looking like this coming out of a major studio, and that's so cool. I haven't even mentioned how the movie is almost devoid of dialogue except for a few sparse jokes they save it for to make it more impactful, or how the climax is the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life, or how they somehow keep every single running gag funny and fresh no matter how many times it gets used, or how their official Twitter account liked my tweet when I put it in my media threads. And I'm not going to elaborate any further because it's all stuff that's best experienced blind. Stop listening to my yapping and go watch Hundreds of Beavers. It's free on YouTube, Tubi, and Pluto TV. If you're in America or have a VPN, you have no excuse not to watch it. Support these creative genius absolute madmen so that they can keep making more cool stuff like this. I need more than 2 movies from them in my life. I wonder how many of my friends watching this thought they'd managed to avoid hearing about Pikmin from me for 20 minutes. Yeah, I've been interested in checking these games out since I was in primary school. Smash Bros. Brawl got Olimar on my radar because I just thought he looked kinda funny. I checked out Let's Plays of the first 3 games growing up and they looked really fun. I just never happened across them outside of some demos. Well, nowadays I'm a working adult and can buy myself whatever I want. So I got myself the first 2 games on the Switch, and as soon as they were done, I immediately got 3 and 4. Now I'm very familiar with all 4 mainline entries. And while I do have a clear favourite, I'm going to talk about all of them for this segment of the video. Let's take it game by game. Pikmin 1 is a great start. Short, sweet, and endlessly replayable as a result. Olimar's an incredibly sympathetic and endearing protagonist. It's fun to amass as large of a Pikmin army as I can as I collect the 30 ship parts. Each of the 3 primary areas are a joy to explore. Combat can be daunting, but it's so satisfying to take down a particularly tough enemy. The boss lineup is mostly very strong. It's what I'd call the most overall well-rounded Pikmin game. If it had some of the modern conveniences like being able to easily organize between Pikmin types and iron out some of the kinks in the AI where they'll run off to pick at the grass or fall off ledges you're trying to cross, I could see this possibly being my favorite of the bunch. I love this game, and that is only strengthened with each of the 3 playthroughs I've done, with hopefully many more to come in the future. Pikmin 2 then. From what I've gathered, this is the one that's either everyone's favorite or least favorite. There is never any in between. I am in the least favorite camp, but that's not because I dislike the game at all. I very much still love Pikmin 2. It does a lot of new things with the formula, having you manage your non-replenishable numbers in caves, giving you far more treasures to collect, introducing sprays, switching between captains, new Pikmin types. I like a lot of the additions to this one. I just personally think it wears out its welcome by the end. The caves go on for way too long, and they aren't as well suited to appeal to me as the overworld exploration. The difficulty as well. It makes it so much more satisfying to complete some of the challenges it sends your way, but there comes a point where certain enemies and hazards just feel annoying to deal with. Great game and all, just isn't as perfectly suited to my taste as the others. I'm going to be replaying it soon though for the boss rankings, so maybe I'll change my tune, who knows. Pikmin 4 was originally going to be covered in a separate spot, just above the Unravel games, but I decided to lump them all into one spot for variety's sake. Plus, this is the thing on the list I'm least confident would stay there if I was to revisit it. It's a really fun collectathon, and I love seeing my hub world become more populated as I save more people. Shipwreck Tale and the Sage Trials are fantastic side content, and I like how you can control your own difficulty slider depending on the items and Ochi upgrades you end up seeking out. But it also has so many well-documented flaws like the overly long tutorial, forced auto-lock, non-respawning enemies, Ochi's charge ability making a lot of combat encounters a bit of a joke, the weird retconning the first 3 games for no good reason. A lot of blemishes that feels like they took a few steps back from 3 and stops this from being my absolute favourite. Speaking of 3 though, that is my favourite. Specifically the Deluxe port on Switch. I haven't played the Wii U version. That doesn't seem to be the consensus in what I've gathered of the wider community, and I can totally see why given how much less challenging this one is, with most combat encounters being way easier to breeze through thanks to the new charge mechanic and the absurdity of Rock Pikmin's immunity to being crushed. If you're asking me though, I don't personally mind the lowered skill floor, because the skill ceiling is still so satisfying to climb towards. As I've said before, this is the game in the series where I find multitasking to be the most satisfying. You have 3 captains that you can switch between at will, and so finding the best way to divide your resources between them, especially on ultra spicy difficulty with a reduced 60 Pikmin limit, is so fun to me. I normally try to complete a task with one captain as I direct another somewhere else with the Go Here feature, then have the third waiting at base to pluck any new Pikmin and round up any that stay there after finishing a task, then swapping places with one of my on-field captains once they run out of party members. That's partly why I'm not quite as bothered with how much easier it is to flatten a lot of the enemies. You still need to make sure your path back to base is clear, and having a large group in one place to tear a big foe apart just means you don't have as many resources diverted elsewhere to be productive. Getting a lot done in one day and seeing a large collection of fruit at the end, or the numbers on the graph go way higher, give me a serotonin rush like you wouldn't believe. As does seeing my total time taken decrease with each subsequent playthrough. Our new main trio of characters might not be as individually compelling as Olimar or as funny as Louis, but I still love the co-pites and their group dynamic that give us plenty of fun banter that the Hocketations can't really facilitate with each other. The story about saving their planet from starvation provides great stakes for our journey, the graphics are gorgeous, the levels are cleverly designed with puzzles that give all Pikmin types a chance to shine, though definitely not all equally. Sorry Blues. The boss fights have a cinematic feel to them and are on a larger scale than any others in the series, and the side missions are equally as stellar as the main story modes. All the treasure collecting ones in particular are so fun to try and grab as much as possible in the time limit, particularly the Christmas one with how densely packed it is and how all 7 current Pikmin types have collectibles best suited to them. I already adored this game upon my first playthrough, but it was the 2 replays that I did on the higher difficulty levels that really cemented this as the top spot on the list. It's close between these top 3, like really close, but Pikmin 3 Deluxe is just barely able to take the spot as my favourite piece of media I checked out in 2024. I really love this series, I had a blast making videos on the first and third game's boss fights, and there's hopefully going to be more videos on the way ranking the bosses in 2 and 4. I love Pikmin, Charlie. And there you have it, my favourite things I experienced throughout 2024. A game clutches the top spot again for the 3rd time in a row, just when I thought a movie was going to have it in the bag. Well, there's always next year. Who knows how that list will turn out. I'm always open to recommendations, so if you have something you think has a good chance of making the cut for the 2025 list, let me know and I might get around to it if I have the time. Or maybe I'll spend a month replaying Pikmin 2 for that boss ranking instead. Anything's possible, really. Anyway, thanks for watching this video, I hope you liked it. Go check out some of my others if you're interested. See you around.